much is an hour of your time worth? Whether you're a realtor, lawyer, accountant, or even a content creator, Stamps.com gives you the ability to focus your time on what you do best, not on tedious mailing and shipping tasks. Print stamps, shipping labels, or certified mail forms in seconds. More than 4 million customers have relied on Stamps.com to make their lives easier. Go to Stamps.com/audio for a special offer. No contract, cancel anytime. That's Stamps.com/audio.
Hi, everyone. This is Jillian with Court Junkie. Court Junkie is a true crime podcast that covers court cases and criminal trials using audio clips and interviews with people close to the cases. Court Junkie is available on Apple Podcasts and podcastone.com.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 297 of the True Crime All the Time Unsolved podcast. I'm Mike Ferguson, and with me, as always, is my partner in true crime, Miguel Gibson. Gibby, how are you?
What's happening, man?
Not much.
Let me see how you changed my name up.
I didn't even know if you would catch it or not.
I picked up really quickly.
Yeah, I changed it a little bit. Miguel.
Using your foreign language skills.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Little babble.
What you don't understand is I can talk 7 different languages.
Or speak 7 different languages.
No, I talk it.
You talk it. Oh, how you doing, man? You doing good?
Yeah.
Yeah, I am too. You know, I was talking to Morph the other day, and I was saying I'm already done with winter.
Yeah.
And it's literally still January. So we got a ways to go, but I'm ready to get outside already. I'm ready for it not to be dark at 3:00 or whatever it is.
I mean, are you kidding? You don't go outside, but I know what you mean.
Yeah, I go outside a little bit more in the summer.
Yeah,
but,
okay.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Can do a little bit more things.
Yeah.
Hey, let's go ahead and give our Patreon shout outs. We had Lauren McAloon.
Hey, Lauren.
Michelle Duvall.
Hey, Duvall.
Amanda Collins.
Hey, what's up, Collins?
Lori Christian.
Hey, thank you, Lori.
Shaylin Likeset.
Hey, Shaylin.
Amy Fleming.
Appreciate that, Fleming.
Heather Queen Fazio.
What's up, Heather?
Stephen Randall's jumped out at her highest level.
Hey, Randall, thank you.
Allie Vetter.
Hey, Vetter.
Regina Abigail Adams.
Well, thank you, Adams.
Lakeisha Santa jumped out at her highest level.
What's going on, Santa?
We had Madison Kokenauer.
Ah, Madison.
Beverly Eisenhower jumped out at our highest level.
Hey, there's good old Beverly.
Dora Smarmy.
Dora from The Explorer.
No, Dora is the Explorer.
Oh, yeah. That too.
Michaela Hull.
Hey, Michaela.
Patrick Bruneau.
Hey, Patrick. Appreciate it.
And last but not least, Carrie Satterthwaite.
Hey, good old Carrie.
And then if we go back into the vault, this week we selected Amanda Gillen.
Hey, Amanda.
Yeah. Big supporter of the show. We appreciate the new support, the continued support. We had great PayPal donations from Samantha Ashton.
Hey, Samantha.
Linda Kempler.
Thank you, Linda.
And Jill Morris.
Oh, thanks, Jill.
Yeah, thank you to everyone. Gibbs, right now on True Crime All the Time, we have an episode out on Joshua Bourne, a police officer in Utah that killed, his immediate family, his mother-in-law, and then killed himself in a murder-suicide. And, it's really the things that led up to it, why he felt as though he needed to do this and all that makes the case interesting.
Such a disturbing case.
Well, it's tragic, obviously. Anytime that many people, lose their lives, a mother, the children, mother-in-law, and for what? I don't want to give it away, but
right.
You have to listen to the episode to find out. All right, buddy, are you ready to get into this episode of True Crime All the Time Unsolved?
I am ready.
We are talking about the disappearance of Dorothy Forstein. Dorothy Forstein was a 40-year-old wife and mother living in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. On the night of October 18th, 1949, Dorothy went missing and was never seen again. Her daughter claimed that she saw a stranger enter their home and carry her unconscious mother out the front door. So obviously that's huge, and we'll get into that more later on in the episode.
Right.
Dorothy was married to a man named Jules Forstein. He was, according to Strange Outdoors, Dorothy's childhood sweetheart. Jules worked as a clerk for the Philadelphia City Council. Now, this was Jules' second marriage. Jules' first wife, Molly Melton Forstein, tragically died in childbirth in July 1940. And it was soon after that Jules and Dorothy were reacquainted. I mentioned it, right? They were childhood sweethearts. So at some point they drifted apart, then they got reacquainted, and they eventually got married.
You don't hear those stories a lot today.
No, I mean, I know some people, some friends who, started dating very, very young, let's say ninth grade.
Yeah.
Ended up getting married, and they're still married today.
Good for them, man.
Yeah. I don't know that it happens as often as it used to. I think partially because the world's bigger, the internet. My grandparents, they lived in a holler in Kentucky.
Right.
There was not a lot to choose from. And I don't say that in a derogatory way. There were no dating apps. You couldn't swipe left or right on your phone and tell somebody that you wanted to meet them.
You were limited.
You were a little limited. Yeah. Now it worked out for them. They were married over 50 years. Jules had two daughters from his first marriage, Myrna and Marcy. Dorothy and Jules had a son named Edward, and Dorothy legally adopted Myrna. According to the Philadelphia Inquirer, Myrna was legally adopted by Dorothy Forstein. So this source doesn't say that Dorothy adopted Marcy, but I think it's reasonable to assume that Marcy was adopted as well. It just doesn't come out and specifically say it for some reason.
But you got to remember, this is an older case.
It is.
You have a hard time finding the answer to everything.
That is very true. That is very true. It was said that Jules and Dorothy had a happy marriage. They lived a good life. Jules was appointed to the magistrate's court in June 1943 by Governor Edward Martin. The Forsteins moved into a 3-story brick home on North Franklin Street in Philadelphia.
Is it kind of like the Will Smith song, moving up in Philly,
I don't remember that song.
What was that show he was in?
Prince of Bel-Air.
Yeah. Wasn't that, he was a kid from Philly?
He might have been from Philly who moved to Bel-Air.
Oh yeah, that's right. He was Bel-Air, California.
Yeah. I don't remember where he was from, but ultimately he ends up in Bel-Air. That's why they call it the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air.
Yeah. Well, I'm better stick with movies instead of TV shows.
Oh, because you're much, much better at those.
Absolutely.
So it was said that Dorothy's neighbors thought of her as a kind woman who loved her family. In 1945, Dorothy was brutally attacked inside her home. On January 25th of that year, Dorothy dropped the children off at a neighbor's house to go shopping. She seemed to be in a good mood. According to Strange Outdoors, she joked with the butcher. She spoke to some friends. She got back home around 8:30 p.m. When Dorothy entered the house, she was attacked by an unknown individual and beaten until she lost consciousness.
Man, back in the 1940s and 50s, when you actually went to go see a butcher, you don't do that today.
Oh, you don't have a butcher?
I do not have a butcher.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, you probably do.
No, I don't. But you're right. I mean, back then it was like, okay, you didn't have the Walmart superstore,
right?
Or you didn't have all the options. And if you wanted some good meat, you went to the butcher.
Yeah.
Now we have some meat stores around here that I guess are kind of like that, but it's not the same. The guy knew your name. He knew what cuts you liked and all of that. It was just a different time.
And Alice really liked her butcher.
She did. Yeah. I think she ended up marrying him.
I think so.
Sam, right?
Sam, yeah.
Was his name. But this was a nasty encounter, especially inside Dorothy's home. We talked about that a lot, right? The place where you're supposed to feel safe. You come home from whatever you've done that day. That's where you're not supposed to have to be on guard all the time. You can relax, put your PJs on, get some tea.
Right.
Lock all the doors and feel safe. The Philadelphia Inquirer reported Mrs. Dorothy Forstein, 35-year-old wife of Magistrate Jules Forstein, was beaten and kicked into unconsciousness last night in her home at 1835 North Franklin Street in a mysterious attack, which police believe may have been motivated by revenge against her husband.
Well, her husband is a judge now. So we've heard this before where individuals will take it out on the judge's family. An act of revenge.
I could see where an initial police theory would center around that. The police found Dorothy on the living room floor. They were called to the house by a telephone operator. Just after the attacker fled, Dorothy managed to drag herself to the phone and grab the receiver before she went unconscious. The operator couldn't get a comprehensive answer from her, so they called the police. Again, going back to the 1940s when you had an operator that had to be part of the call. And I know you've said it before. Your mom actually was a switchboard operator.
She was for a long time.
For a long time.
Yeah. She loved,
connecting those, whatever you called them.
Yeah. And eavesdropping to the conversations that they all had to do back then.
Yeah, I'm sure.
Yeah.
I'm sure that was a lot of fun for people, especially who like to hear other people's dirt.
She had some interesting stories.
I bet. Now, Dorothy was in serious condition at the hospital. Her jaw and shoulder were fractured. She was covered in bruises. According to Strange Outdoors, when she woke up in the hospital, she said, "Someone jumped out at me. I couldn't see who it was. He just hit me and hit me." Dorothy's neighbor, Maria Townley, saw her come home and thought that someone was either with her or walking behind her as she went to the front door. Maria admitted that she didn't really take a close look at the man. It was also getting dark. They lived in a safe neighborhood, and Maria never thought that Dorothy was in danger. Gibbs, you and I have talked about it before. People didn't even lock their doors back then.
No. I mean, I had friends and family that didn't lock their doors until the early 2000s, which I thought was crazy. I think we started locking ours in the 1980s.
Yeah, I've been locking mine for a very long time. I've always been not worried, but safety conscious. But I do remember as a kid, somebody broke into our house, and that probably instilled that in me. We kind of talk about that. A lot of times it takes an incident, or whether it's to you personally or something big happening in your community, for everyone to start saying, okay, now it's time to lock our doors. And a lot of communities have that and can point back to what it was.
Yeah.
That kind of took away the innocence of everybody feeling like there's no need to worry, we're always safe. Jules was not home during the attack. Robbery was ruled out as a motive because Dorothy's purse was untouched and found next to her inside the home. Investigators believe that Dorothy was the victim of an attempted murder. Captain James Kelly of the Philadelphia Homicide Division concluded that this was the only possibility. Again, going back to nothing being stolen, Dorothy had no known enemies. Jules had a very strong alibi. So the most popular theory was that the attacker could have been someone who appeared before Jules Forstein in court and wanted revenge, right? You kind of foreshadowed that or talked about it. But Jules couldn't think of anyone who would have wanted to get revenge on him by attacking Dorothy. No arrests were ever made in that 1945 attack. But after experiencing such a traumatic event, Dorothy became fearful. She locked all the doors, locked all the windows, and was scared to go out after dark.
How could you not be? You were in your most trusted place and brutally attacked. It's going to be hard to recover from that. It's going to be hard to say, oh, I still feel safe.
Yeah, I mean, recover, I get it. I would say go back to the way you were. You're going to live your life, but I think you're going to have to live it differently, or at least a lot of people are.
Yeah.
You're not going to be as carefree. You're going to be a little more worried about certain situations. And, like for Dorothy, it becomes about, going out after dark and making sure that all the doors and windows are locked. 4 years later, on the evening of October 18th, 1949, Dorothy Forstein went missing and was never seen again. It seemed like a normal Tuesday. Earlier that day, Dorothy spoke with her mother and made arrangements to bring in a new housekeeper. Dorothy and her 2 youngest children spent the evening at home. She called a friend around 9 p.m. to make arrangements for them to go shopping in 2 days. It was said that she seemed happy during the call. Jules was gone for the evening at a political banquet. 18-year-old Myrna was out visiting friends that night. Jules called Dorothy around 10 p.m. and told her that he wouldn't be home too late. She said that all was well at home and reportedly told her husband, "Be sure to miss me," before she ended the call. Be sure to miss me.
That's a sweet thing to say, depending how you look at it.
Well, that's what I was going to kind of talk about. I think you could look at it a couple of different ways.
Yeah.
If nothing happens that night, you're probably looking at it as though, hey, I know you're out there having fun. You better be missing me.
Could be a little flirtatious.
Or that as well. Now, in hindsight, knowing that something is going to happen, maybe you could read into it a little bit.
Yeah, you could.
And maybe some people have and do. Jules got home around 11:30. He found his children, Edward and Marcy, in their room. They were upset. And one of them said something to the effect of, "Mother's gone." Jules was surprised that Dorothy left the children home alone, but he assumed she had left to see her friends or neighbors. He made several calls, but no one had seen Dorothy. Dorothy was reported missing early on October 19th, 1949. Jules said he last spoke to her at 10 p.m. on the 18th. When he got home an hour later, Dorothy was gone. He assumed that she was out. But when she didn't come back quickly, he and his brother-in-law, Arthur Cooper, started looking for her. They reached out to relatives and friends, and none of them had seen Dorothy. Jules contacted the police, and a teletype alarm was sent out with Dorothy's information.
Well, so they're doing everything right. They're letting the authorities know that, hey, my wife's missing. I don't know where she's at. We've done the best we could reaching out to friends and family. They haven't seen her. Here's some information about her. Can you help us try to locate her?
Yeah, in a lot of cases we're questioning how long it takes for a family member to kind of reach out to authorities.
Yeah.
I think this is pretty typical. Are you going to call the police the minute you get home? Probably not, because your mind is not going to normally go right to the worst has happened.
Right.
It's going to be, well, she ran over to the neighbor's house, or, she ran out to the store to get something. And then you're going to make some calls, and then maybe you're going to get in your car and travel to a couple of places that maybe she could be. Yeah. And then you're probably going to call the police. So that it all seems very normal to me. Again, you can't call on a cell phone.
No, you cannot. You
can't use a tracking app like I do with my family.
Right. Again, you're in the 40s. So, and she's an adult. An adult could decide to do something that night without telling you.
It was 9-year-old Marcy who had a piece of key information in the case. Marcy told her story to her father once he got home and to the police. She claimed that she saw a stranger enter the house and carry her mother out the front door. The Philadelphia Inquirer published her statement. It read, "I heard the door open downstairs and looked over the rail and saw a man come up the steps. He had on a brown cap with a peak, not pulled down too much, and something brown in his shirt. He walked directly to Mother's room in the front. I looked through the door as he entered and saw Mother lying on the floor on her face. She looked ill. The man turned her over on her back, picked her up, and put her over his right shoulder so that her head hung over his back. She had on pajamas. As he turned to the steps, I said to him, "What are you doing?" And he said, "You go back to sleep. Your mother is all right." As he went out the front door, I heard the lock on the door snap closed. I went back to bed, but I couldn't sleep. And 15 minutes later, my father came home.
So it's very interesting.
Well, it's interesting, and there's a couple of things that jump out at me. First of all, it's pretty detailed.
It is.
For a 9-year-old story.
Yeah.
There's detail in, the man's cap, his shirt, recalling the conversation that she had with this man, how her mother looked, all of that.
And then remembering that her dad came home 15 minutes later.
Yeah.
It's pretty good detail.
It is. It is. Now, according to police, Jules was not impressed by Marcy's story. He believed that Dorothy was out visiting with someone, but when she didn't come back, as we mentioned, he and Dorothy's brother searched for her. They reported her missing around 3:40 a.m. And it was said that the police were also skeptical of Marcy's story. It was initially considered the wild imaginings of a child.
Well, it was probably hard to believe a 9-year-old would have that much detail. I did find it interesting, too, that she said that he walked directly into mother's room, almost like maybe they had separate bedrooms.
Oh, because, yeah, I do think a lot of people did back then. At least on TV they did for a long time.
Well, that's true. Or at least separate beds.
Or separate beds.
I mean, I get it. Kids can have really good imaginations. And maybe they can add to what they saw or interpret it a different way.
Or completely make it up. Kids do that. But here's what I don't understand. You have no idea at this point, if you're the police, what happened to Dorothy Forstein. You don't have any leads.
No.
So why would you completely discount this child's account when what would be the reasoning for her to lie? Other than the fact that kids do lie and they make stuff up, but right. There wouldn't be a reason to do it. She's not trying to cover anything up.
But when your own father doesn't believe you, the police are probably going to follow his suit a little bit because, one, he's your father. He's also a magistrate. They're probably going to put some credibility behind that.
Oh, so I asked the same question. Why wouldn't Dad believe you? That's pretty rough when Dad doesn't believe you.
It is.
Now, maybe Dad knows that you do have a history of fibbing.
Yeah.
Which is totally possible. I don't know that. It wasn't in the research. True Crime All the Time Unsolved is brought to you by Progressive Insurance. Let's face it, sometimes multitasking can be overwhelming. Like when your favorite podcast is playing and the person next to you is talking and your car fan is blasting, all while you're trying to find the perfect parking spot. But then again, sometimes multitasking is easy, like quoting with Progressive Insurance. They do the hard work of comparing rates so you can find a great rate that works for you, even if it's not with them. Give their nifty comparison tool a try, and you might just find getting the rate and coverage you deserve is easy. All you need to do is visit Progressive's website to get a quote with all the coverages you want, like comprehensive and collision coverage or personal injury protection. Then you'll see Progressive's direct rate, and their tool will provide options from other companies all lined up and ready to compare. So it's simple to choose the rate and coverages you like. Press play on comparing auto rates. Quote at Progressive.com to join the over 29 million drivers who trust Progressive. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Comparison rates not available in all states or situations. Prices vary based on how you buy. Now, Gibbs, you know I love that sound. That's the sound of another sale on Shopify. Shopify is the commerce platform revolutionizing millions of businesses worldwide. Whether you're selling your own arts and crafts or homemade true crime stuff, Shopify simplifies selling online and in person so you can focus on successfully growing your business. Shopify covers every sales channel, from in-person POS systems to an all-in-one e-commerce platform. It even lets you sell across social media marketplaces like TikTok, Facebook, and Instagram. Shopify is packed with industry-leading tools ready to ignite your growth, and it gives you complete control over your business and your brand without having to learn any new skills in design or code. We use Shopify for our podcast merch, and when we switched, it made the process so much easier. Now it's your turn to get serious about selling and try Shopify today. This is Possibility powered by Shopify. Sign up for a $1 per month trial period at shopify.com/unsolved, all lowercase. Go to shopify.com unsolved to take your business to the next level today. Shopify.com/unsolved. On a winter night in a small community near Denver, Colorado, Jim Matthews arrived home late. He expected to find his 12-year-old daughter, who'd been dropped off after a Christmas concert, but when he called out, "Hi, Janelle," the house was eerily quiet. His daughter's shoes were on the floor, but she was gone. And it would be 35 years before she would be found dead. After the discovery of Janelle Matthews' body in 2019, the police turned their attention to a man who had told law enforcement years ago that he knew something, but they dismissed him. The man did seem obsessed with the case, but is that all he was? A true crime fanatic or a killer? Wondery and Campside Media's podcast Suspect is back for a second season with a story that attempts to separate one man's true crime obsession from a motive for murder. We know you're going to love Suspect. This is a true crime podcast that is right up your alley. Listen to Suspect wherever you get your podcasts. Hey, Prime members, you can binge the entire series ad-free on Amazon Music. Download the Amazon Music app today. The police broadcast Dorothy's description. They interviewed her family and friends. They checked local hospitals, morgues, and hotels. They also went door to door in the neighborhood. No one reported seeing Dorothy, and no one reported any type of unusual activity. When the police searched the house, they found Dorothy's purse and keys. Nothing was disturbed inside the home. There were no signs of forced entry because the front door was locked when Jules got home.
Well, if you believe the little girl's story, she said when the man left with his mom, he closed the door and she heard it click.
As in locked.
Right.
Yeah. To me, the big thing that jumps out is the purse and keys.
Yeah.
As we've talked about a lot of times, how many women leave home without purse, keys, all that stuff? Now, if you were just going to run next door to the neighbor's house for 5 minutes, maybe.
Right.
Maybe. But we know that's not what happened. Police know that's not what happened.
Right.
So now you have to start coming up with other theories. And to me, that's got to play into it. According to the Philadelphia Inquirer, after not finding any leads, Jules had Marcy examined by a psychiatrist. The psychiatrist's determination was that this child is telling the truth.
Vindication.
Vindication for the child?
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess so. According to the Philadelphia Inquirer, on October 20th, 1949, detectives said that Mrs. Forstein may have suffered amnesia or have been the victim of foul play. But they acknowledged that they had no real leads in the case.
I think if you believe that the daughter was telling the truth, then I think you have to believe it's foul play.
Well, absolutely, because in that account, it sounds as though she was taken against her will.
Right.
But it does seem as though, at some point, they did start to lean towards believing Marcy's account because they started a massive search for Dorothy. The case was assigned to Captain James F. Kelly, head of the homicide squad. On October 22nd, the police sent out a new message about the case. The Philadelphia Inquirer reported that Assistant Superintendent of Police George Richardson broadcast a new report about Dorothy's disappearance in 8 states. It read, "We have reported missing to this department since October 18th, Mrs. Dorothy Forstein, 40, 5 feet 2 inches tall, 125 pounds, blue eyes, natural dull blonde hair, artificially lightened, which has a natural wave. She has a light complexion, a goiter operation scar at the base of the neck, a cyst operation scar front of left leg, and appendix scar 10 years old. Right shoulder falls out of place without physical effort. She needs hospitalization to have this reset, and this occurs about 3 times a year. She is known to suffer very high nervous strain. Only known clothing worn were a pair of red pajamas and red bedroom slippers. She favors tailored suits. The only jewelry she had at the time was a plain gold wedding band with no inscription. May use the name of Dorothy Cooper or Dora Cooper. Foul play feared.
That's a lot of description.
It is. I mean, they went into every scar that she had, the fact that her right shoulder tends to, pop out of place all the time. The natural dull blonde hair kind of threw me a little bit.
It's almost like they got a hold of her hairdresser.
Not just blonde.
Yeah, dull.
Dull blonde. But
also artificially lightened.
Yeah.
So
with a natural wave.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, I think they went into a lot of detail, even going as far as to talk about, that she suffers from very high nervous strain.
Right. But I guess this is all good things to know. If you think you come across her, it might help you to identify her. Well,
I've always said the more the better.
Yeah.
Because you never know what someone's going to latch on to, whether it's seeing somebody whose shoulder pops out, somebody who appears very nervous. You just never know.
Right. In a tailored suit.
In a tailored suit. According to the Philadelphia Inquirer, Richardson also asked for the arrest of the abductor described by Marcy. He was 40 to 45 years old, wearing a brown cap and jacket, and he said maybe in the company of Mrs. Forstein. By October 23rd, the police had traced almost 100 phone tips from neighbors, friends, and others. Jules disclosed this information to the paper. So, we mentioned it early on. It seemed as though police felt that Dorothy left voluntarily.
Yeah.
But I think with, this kind of broadcast out in the paper, it's obvious that they switched gears and they started to believe Marcy's story because now they believe Dorothy's been abducted by this man. They're even giving out his description.
It changes your whole focus and your direction.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a big difference working off of a theory that somebody voluntarily left versus the fact that they were abducted. And the Philadelphia Inquirer wrote a lot about Marcy's story. In one article, they said that, people thought that her story was a child's dramatization of an incident that happened in January of 1945. But they also wrote that she never changed her story.
Pretty persistent.
Yeah, she was very persistent. She maintained it. And that's why later on, the police started looking for a man matching her description. The paper also wrote that one tip came from Camden police officer Edward Shapiro, who said he saw a strange woman who looked like Dorothy twice near 4th and Federal Streets on Friday, October 21st and Saturday the 22nd. He said that he first saw a blonde woman in a phone booth in a candy and magazine store on Federal Street. Based on her conversation, she seemed to be talking to a girl and was promising to come to Philadelphia right away. He became interested in the woman when she seemed to be startled at seeing him. So he followed her to 4th and Federal Streets. The woman went into a tap room. He followed her in, saw her drinking a beer, but she left when she saw him. She was about 5'2", weighed a little over 120 pounds, which matched Dorothy's description. She wore a rust-colored coat draped over her shoulders.
So it's possible, right? I mean, Camden, New Jersey is not too far away from Philly.
So apparently he saw her the next night talking to a man on Federal Street wearing the same coat, and he overheard part of their conversation. He said the woman laughingly told the man, "I've only got one arm." And he thought this was important because of Dorothy's shoulder issues. The search for Dorothy went nationwide. On October 25th, police across the country were asked to check records of all unidentified dead women and to contact hospitals, hotels, convalescent homes, and mental institutions. After the Camden tip, the police traveled to Delaware County. After heavy blood smears were found on a highway, Also on the 25th, Captain Kelly's homicide squad checked Dorothy's safety deposit box. He disclosed that nothing was missing from the safety deposit box, which, according to him, added credence to the theory that Dorothy didn't leave willingly.
When I read that in the research, my question was, how do they know what's in the safety deposit box?
Oh, I just assumed that maybe her husband knew and they confirmed with him.
That's probably the most reasonable conclusion, right?
But it's a good question to ask. Now, does it add credence? To me, I think it does. When you put everything together, the purse, the keys, nothing missing from the safety deposit box, assuming that's a true statement, it kind of makes it hard to think that this woman just all of a sudden left. Not to mention the fact that would mean she would be leaving her kids behind willingly.
Which is most likely something she would not do.
Yeah, most women would not. The Philadelphia Inquirer reported that on October 26th, the Assistant Superintendent of Police, George Richardson, said that their latest leads indicated that Dorothy was seen alive. Richardson said he expected an early solution in the case, but he would not disclose the new evidence, but said persons close to the case believed that it came from a recheck of every hotel in the city commenced about 24 hours earlier.
Well, that's some confidence.
Well, reading between the lines, it makes it seem as though they found some type of evidence that Dorothy had stayed at a hotel in the city.
Yeah.
He's not coming out and saying it, but what else are people to believe? Richardson made this statement after he had conferred with a squad of police women assigned to search the hotels. The officers and detectives checked every hotel in the city by looking at the registers and speaking to employees. The paper wrote, it was indicated that one of these sources came up with some information that caused Richardson to believe the case was about to be solved. Again, that's very general, and I think he's being that way on purpose. He's not coming out and saying what the information is specifically.
Yeah. But he feels good about the information.
Yeah. Yeah. It seems as though he does. It didn't stop the search, though. From Dorothy, it extended from coast to coast. Clerks at the city hall were working on sending out 10,000 missing persons flyers around the country. Investigators also admitted that they didn't have anything to disprove or corroborate Marcy's story.
That kind of goes both ways, right? I mean, that's exactly what they're saying. We can't disprove it, but we can't agree that Marcy was telling the truth either. So we're going to hit this at all angles.
Yeah, and I'll go back to, if you don't have something that disproves it, why wouldn't you believe it?
Exactly. You're better off to believe it, even if you can't corroborate it, instead of just tossing it to the side.
And discounting it.
Yeah.
Which, I mean, they came around on it eventually. The Philadelphia Inquirer reported that on November 16th, Jules Forstein posted a $1,000 reward in the case. He said he offered the reward in the hope of obtaining genuine information regarding his wife's whereabouts, and also to stamp out false rumors, which have circulated since her disappearance.
Not a bad chunk of change?
No, not in 1949. You and I do cases that are not that old at all, where it's a couple of $1,000s offered as a reward. And I always say the same thing. Who's going to put themselves in harm's way, rat out somebody for a couple of $1,000? Now, $1,000 in 1949, that may have tempted someone.
Yeah,
for sure. On December 27th, the body of an unidentified woman was found floating in Biscayne Bay in Miami, Florida. On the 28th, the police attempted to determine if she was a New York showgirl. Okay, we're pretty far from Philadelphia.
We are.
When you talk about Miami, Florida. And it's interesting that by the very next day, there's already some type of talk about the fact that this girl might have been from New York.
Right.
Now they say showgirl, but New York, Northeast kind of area, the woman was described as graying, blonde, and 40 years old. Marking on her skirt and blouse indicated that her clothing was purchased in a part of New York where theatrical people lived. Her white flannel skirt was tentatively identified as a skirt missing from the Eve's Costume Company in New York. The police quoted an official as saying that this company outfitted the production of Good News in Pittsburgh in 1948, and that only one skirt had not been returned. The flannel skirt the woman was wearing matched the description of the missing skirt. Other evidence from the woman's body showed that she had expensive surgery and dental work. There was also a shoe label that was being gathered as evidence.
So at this point, we have a dead woman found in Miami that the authorities believe could be from New York.
There's not a lot to go on. Now, in Philadelphia, Captain James Kelly requested that the Miami police compare the woman to the information they sent about Dorothy Forstein. He told the Inquirer, while there is only a remote chance that this is the body of Mrs. Forstein, we're not overlooking any clue in our search for the missing woman.
Good for him to try to exhaust every avenue.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I agree with that. According to the Inquirer, the autopsy revealed that the woman died of a brain hemorrhage before her body was thrown in the bay. The police believed her face was bludgeoned by her killer. According to Detective Hall of the Homicide Bureau, the autopsy revealed that she'd had a major abdominal operation several years ago. Doctor said she had a dental bridge that could have cost $1,000. This, plus her expensive yachting costume, led investigators to believe that she was a person of better than average means.
I would say so.
On December 29th, the authorities announced that the body found in Miami was not Dorothy Forstein. C.W. Pierce, detective superintendent at Miami Beach, sent a telegram to Philadelphia saying that there were no distinguishing marks on the body like the ones in Dorothy's description.
So they're back to square one.
They're back to square one. I mean, the one thing that I did think was that it goes back to what was a very detailed description.
Sure was.
Of Dorothy, including, all the different scars that she had. So it sounds like it probably made it pretty easy to figure out that this unknown woman was not Dorothy. She didn't have the same scars and therefore couldn't be her. On February 12th, 1950, Dorothy's brother, Arthur Cooper, disclosed that he and an investigator would leave within the next few days to an undisclosed location to follow up on a clue that, according to him, was the most promising to date. He said Captain Kelly or another detective would go with him. So we're into the next year. And again, these kind of snippets that come out in the Inquirer, they're interesting, but they're so vague.
Right.
They're promising, but we don't know why. People believe, including Dorothy's brother, that, they're so promising.
Yeah, you're right. It's really vague. We don't know any of the details around where they're going and why they're going.
And I mentioned earlier that Dorothy's shoulder slipped out quite a bit. It was reported in papers that the family's hopes were strengthened by this fact that, it seemed about like every 4 months her shoulder would pop out. She would need to go to a hospital for treatment. So all the likely hospitals she might have gone to were notified. So they were kind of hanging on that.
That's a smart move.
Yeah. According to the Philadelphia Inquirer, one question that was never really explained was why Dorothy would leave the house when Edward was just starting to recover from a serious viral infection. We talked about, how many mothers would just voluntarily leave their kids. And now you find out that her youngest, Edward, was just starting to recover from a serious viral infection. Okay, maybe even more reason not to just up and leave, which I don't think most people thought she did anyway. One thing that was said was that Dorothy's family was in a state of constant worry. I don't know what family wouldn't be.
Yeah, I think it'd be difficult. I mean, we know it's going to be difficult. Life moves on, but the family's going to be constantly wondering, where's she at? Is she ever going to come home? Are we ever going to hear anything more about her?
Yeah, we know from covering, so many cases that these types of disappearances / abductions, they take an incredible toll on a family. Dorothy's mother's health declined. She lost a bunch of weight. By February 1950, hundreds of leads had been followed up on without anything really, panning out. No one had given any new information to get the reward money offered by Jules. By this point, as reported by the Inquirer, investigators completely discounted Marcy's story about what happened on the night of Dorothy's disappearance. The paper reported that according to her family, Marcy was questioned once by a psychiatrist and would not be questioned again.
Yeah, I mean, why would you want to put your daughter through that? That's a lot to put a kid through. Make them recount what happened to their mother that night.
Yeah, I'm sure it would be tough. What I don't understand is how investigators went from, in the beginning thinking that this story was, bogus, to then buying into it,
right,
to the point where they're looking for someone who matches the description that Marcy gave, and in a pretty short amount of time going to back to completely discounting it. Because what changed? There were still no indications that Dorothy left voluntarily. We mentioned the safety deposit box. When Dorothy's brother was allowed to inspect it, he found a considerable sum of money still inside it.
If you're going to flee, wouldn't you take the money?
And your purse.
Yeah.
You would think. In May 1951, Jules Forstein renewed the $1,000 reward for information leading to Dorothy's whereabouts. And we mentioned this earlier on, but one popular theory is that someone had a grudge against Jules and abducted Dorothy to get revenge. Although he has never been charged with anything in connection to Dorothy's case, one theory involves a man named Morris Anmuth, who was 29 years old at the time that Dorothy went missing. On September 7th, 1944, a crowd came together in the city to protest the former governor of New York and Republican presidential candidate Thomas Dewey. So Dewey was going to make a speech at the Pennsylvania Railroad Station. Two police officers, James McCarthy and Samuel Ralston, saw Anmuth and believed he was acting in a threatening manner because he booed Dewey. They charged him with inciting to riot and assault and battery. Anmuth filed assault and battery charges against the police officers. He claimed that the two men beat him for almost 20 minutes.
Gotta be careful who you boo.
Man, you couldn't boo in 1944?
I guess not, man.
A presidential candidate?
That's just rude. I like in England how they throw the eggs at people.
Man, that could be considered assault.
Today it would be.
On May 22nd, 1945, a trial involving officers James McCarthy, Samuel Ralston, and Morris Anmuth started before Judge Claire Finnerty. The trial involved the incident from September 7th, 1944, when Anmuth booed Dewey. McCarthy and Ralston were tried with Anmuth. Anmuth was taken before Judge Jules Forstein and held under $500 for the grand jury. However, Jules failed to make a return and imposed a $10 fine for disorderly conduct. Shortly after, warrants were sworn out against the officers for assault and battery. The case was brought to James McBride, who held all three men before the grand jury. According to the Philadelphia Inquirer, Inspector Herbert Kitchenman, who is in charge of the special detail, testified that Anmuth booed at the party as they were boarding their train. When another spectator took exception, it became a police problem. Foot traffic patrolman Peter Riley testified that when McCarthy and Ralston tried to escort Anmuth from the station to avoid a fight, Anmuth became abusive and tried to sit on the floor. On May 23rd, 1945, the three men were acquitted by a jury after 50 minutes of deliberation. Judge Finnerty asserted that the verdict should be suitable to all the parties concerned, and added that the case should have been stopped in Jules Forstein's court. So there is some speculation that Anmuth was possibly the person who attacked Dorothy in 1945, or that possibly he was the one who abducted her, but he's never been charged with anything in relation to her case.
You'd have to really hold a grudge.
Well, and somebody could.
You could.
I could see where it could happen, when this other judge comes out and says, it never even should have made it to my court.
Right.
Judge Forstein should have stopped it. And really, it's kind of laughable if you think about it.
It is.
The guy boos, he sits on the floor, and he's charged with inciting to riot and assault and battery. And then he files charges against these two police officers, and they're all on trial.
Right. I mean, anymore, it sounds like a typical protest, right? Boo, you sit down.
Not even a typical protest. Today,
that's light.
That would be light as to the things people are doing and saying,
yeah.
In today's environment. I get it. It's a theory. And in a lot of these unsolved cases, that's really all you have. But there's just not a lot of meat on the bone.
Right.
There. You could see how maybe somebody would be upset that they had to go through all of that and be on trial when, a judge says it never should have even happened. The jury comes back and says, we're letting all these guys go, but upset to the point where, you tried to kill this woman, you abducted this woman.
It's hard to swallow.
It is. I mean, it's far-fetched. We've seen far-fetched things happen before, though.
Well, we have, though. That's true.
On January 1st, 1956, 49-year-old Jules Forstein was found dead in his bed just one day after he took his oath for another term on the city's minor judiciary bench. He was found at 2 p.m. by his close friend, Richard Dickstein. In September 1957, a petition was filed with the Orphans Court of Philadelphia to have Dorothy Forstein declared legally dead. Jules left a little over $4,900, and Dorothy left almost $10,000 in securities in her safe deposit box. The petition was filed by Myrna Shapiro's attorney, Herbert Levin. Levin was named a trustee of Dorothy's estate. There was also 16-year-old Marcy and, by this time, 12-year-old Edward, who were living with Myrna. On October 14th of that year, Judge Charles Klein of the Orphans Court ruled that Dorothy would be declared legally dead. As of October 18th, Captain David Roberts of the Homicide Squad and Myrna testified that all their efforts to find Dorothy were unsuccessful. The petition stated that it was believed that Dorothy was forcibly removed from the house and that the younger children said a stranger took her out of the house. So, as we wrap up this case, Gibbs, it's been 73 years since Dorothy Forstein went missing. I won't even use the word unlikely. There's no possible way that she's alive today. She would be about 114 years old.
Yeah, that's not going to happen, right?
And to be honest with you, I don't believe she left her home voluntarily. That doesn't seem to be the most likely scenario based on the evidence, the limited evidence we have in this case. I don't think she would have left, her young children home alone. We mentioned it. Edward was just starting to get over this viral infection. She didn't take money.
Yeah, she had nearly $10,000 back in 1949.
If you're going to start a new life, you're going to want that $10,000. That doesn't make sense.
Right.
She didn't take, personal belongings, all that stuff. And we mentioned it. After that 1945 attack, Dorothy was very fearful about going out at night. So if she was going to pick a time to leave her family, it seems as though it wouldn't have been at night.
Right. She would have waited till the morning.
Yeah. Sometime during the day when it's light out, all of that. And then you have Marcy's story of witnessing a strange man abducting her mother. it's really one of the only pieces of real evidence in the case, assuming she's telling the truth. So my thought is that the most likely outcome is that Dorothy Forstein was abducted by some unknown man. We have no idea who this man is. I don't know what happened to her, but I don't believe that most likely she lived very long after being removed from her house. I just don't think she did.
I think I tend to agree with that. But an interesting case.
I think the one thing that people struggle with when it comes to this case is, okay, what's the motive? If it's not someone who was upset with Judge Forstein and wanted to get revenge, what's the motive? My thought is there are a lot of cases where there's no motive that ties back to the victim per se. The motive is that someone saw an opportunity. They saw Dorothy at some point in time, maybe followed her, saw where she lived, cased the house, knew that her husband wasn't home, and struck. That is a real possibility. That happens. Now, what's the motive for it? The motive is whatever the abductor killer is seeking at that point in time.
Could just been fascinated with her. Could have been a certain type of killer that she fit his profile.
Yeah. Could have been a sexual predator, killer, a lust killer. I mean, you can go down the line of different classifications of different types of killers. Some people just want to kill. And I know that's a scary thought to a lot of people.
But we know that to be true.
It's absolutely true.
And it's easy to put the blinders on when you think about the husband being in law enforcement, being a judge.
Yeah.
Right? That, it has to be related to that. But if you don't look at that angle and purely look at all the other options, what you're saying is true.
The problem is those cases are very hard to solve.
Of course.
Because then it becomes completely random.
Yeah.
Let's say this person is not known to the family. There is no connection. There is no tie. There's no motive that ties back to anyone in the family. So how do you figure it out?
Yeah.
And a lot of times you can't. Now today they do it through DNA or some advancements in technology. In 1949, without all of that type of stuff, they were really trying to put the pieces of the puzzle together. And I can imagine a lot of that had to do with motive.
Sure. Yeah.
And it still does today. Don't get me wrong.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't know that this is one that is likely to be solved. Again, we're 70 plus years later. And my feeling is this is just one of those cases that is practically unsolvable if there is absolutely no connection between the Forsteins and this killer. But that's it for our episode on the unsolved disappearance of Dorothy Forstein. We got some voicemails. You want to check those out?
Let's hear them.
Hey, Mike and Gibby. I just want to thank you guys. I found this podcast and I have severe depression and I've been really isolating in the house. And you guys are the only ones that are getting me through this. I enjoy listening to you so much. You guys are excellent in what you do, and I really appreciate the fact that you make this podcast. It's by far my favorite. I've listened to every single episode, and I'm re-catching up on every single episode, but it has saved me from falling into a deeper depression than normal. And I want to thank you guys for that. And some random guy from California says, one love. Love you guys.
All right. One love back. So I hate to hear that anybody is going through that.
Sure.
But I think a lot of us, a lot more of us are experiencing that type of stuff, over the last few years. And I know I've said it, I'll say it again. I want to make sure that, people are taking care of themselves mentally.
Right.
And, there are things that can help with depression. I know there are, whether it's medication or therapy but I'm glad the podcast helps. I really am.
Absolutely.
but I hope everybody out there is taking care of their mental health in the best way they can. I really mean that, because I just worry what the last few years has done to us. The isolation during COVID and people not getting to see each other as much as they used to and interact.
Definitely had an impact.
And even now, more people are working from home. They're not going into the office and seeing other people and talking. So
right.
We got to do some things differently and make sure that, we're all taking care of ourselves, us included.
That's right.
I'm putting us in that mix as well.
Yeah, definitely.
Woo! All right. Hey, this is David from Kentucky again. I'm all caught up on everything. Unsolved, true crime all the time. I got bored, so I thought I'd go back and redo everything all over again. And I want Fergie to know that I am really proud of how far you've come since the first start of True Crime All the Time. You were stiff and kind of slow at the beginning, but man, you have really stepped your game up. Although Gibby was, unnatural, like she is at everything. So just wanted to let you know, keep your own time ticking. Talk to you later.
Yeah, I appreciate that very much. I don't know how many people understand how hard it is in the beginning. We're not professional broadcasters, or we had no training in how to do a podcast.
Right.
So yeah, some of the first ones I don't listen to very much because they're a little painful.
Yeah.
But finding your groove is tough. Now, if we were to start a new one today, okay, the first episode would probably be better, hopefully.
Sure. Yeah.
than the first episode of TCAP.
We've learned a lot. You learned a lot.
Yeah,
for
definitely.
Sure.
Definitely. And we try to get better all the time. We try to learn.
Yeah.
I know you try to up your vocabulary every day with that word of the day calendar.
I try.
I get you a new one every year. It seems to really be paying off.
Probably just give me the same one every year. I wouldn't know the difference, but I'm surprised he said he's heard everything. I wonder if he's heard the secret tapes we have out there.
Oh, I don't know. I don't know how many people know about those. Yeah. I'll have to search.
Yeah.
Search. All right, buddy. That is it for another episode of True Crime All the Time Unsolved. So for Mike
and Gibby,
stay safe and keep your own time ticking.
All month long on Pluto TV, stream the biggest Tyler Perry movies free. Watch your favorites like Medea's Witness Protection and Medea's Big Happy Family. Join Tyler Perry as he goes on a couples retreat with Sharon Leal in Why Did I Get Married? Or Idris Elba and Gabrielle Union in the Tyler Perry directed film Daddy's Little Girls. Plus, Pluto TV has hundreds of channels with thousands more movies and TV shows. Available on live and on demand. Download the free Pluto TV app on all your favorite devices and start streaming now. Pluto TV. Drop in, watch free.
How much is your time worth? Whether you're a realtor, lawyer, accountant, or even a content creator, Stamps.com gives you the chance to focus your time on what you do best. Don't waste your time mailing letters or shipping packages. Stamps is there to help. Print stamps, shipping labels, or certified mail forms in seconds. Get up to 89% off USPS, UPS, and other carriers, and schedule free package pickups all from one place. Stamps.com also makes it easy to track shipments, manage contacts, and report on how much you send and spend. Over the last 28 years, more than 4 million customers have relied on Stamps.com to make their lives easier. Don't waste time worrying about being a postage expert or standing in line to drop off letters and packages. Let Stamps.com do what they do best so you can do what you do better. Go to Stamps.com/audio to sign up for a special offer. No contract, cancel anytime. That's Stamps.com/audio.